have seen these speak before, I'm sorry. I repeat myself a lot. I feel like Leonard Skinner. I'm going to do Freebird to start. I will say a lot of the same crap I say all the time. Partly because I have to keep saying it, because not everybody gets it. Partly because I keep relearning it myself and learning how to say it in different ways. Well, here's what I need to talk about. I need to give you a bit of a history lesson. I think I'm going to start I'm going to go all the way back to the early days of software development. I'm going to go back to the 1980s and 1990s. I want to talk to you about the way it used to work, because it influences a lot of the way we work today. I need to fast forward to around 2000, 2001 and talk about how everything started to change then. But it started to diverge in some interesting ways, or ways that kind of affected me. In 2011, there were some other big changes that fundamentally changed the way we build software. And we've got to talk about how things work today. The way products work today is completely different, and the way products work has changed the way we work. That's just a bunch of dates. Let's dig in. I'm old. In 1985, I sold software for a living. I didn't finish my degree in computer science. I bailed out early, and I started working in a software store and squandered my computer science knowledge. That's not me. It was exactly the way I work in a software store. Before it wasn't called Software Etc. It was called Software and More. Completely different. Now, did anybody have a computer in the 1980s or 1990s? Okay, some old people here too. Sorry about that. I shouldn't have said that out loud. Do you remember how you bought that stuff in the 1980s and 1990s? Did you ever go to a software store? How did it look? It was in a box. I found this is one of the products I sold tons of in my software store. It was a reading program. It came with 3.5 and 5.25 inch floppy disks. This is a picture of the box. I sold a lot of this stuff because people who had spent a couple $1,000s on a computer, which was a lot of money back then, more than it is now, had to justify their purchase by saying it's for educational stuff for our kids. They would rush out for another $50 on this kind of stuff. Now, look, back then we sold software in boxes, and that's what a product looked like. Now, before I dig into this stuff, I want to talk to you about what a product is. I think I've preloaded this. If I were to say the term successful product to you, what comes to mind? What do you think makes a product successful? Yeah, how was that?
People pay for it.
People use it, people pay for it. There's some other stuff I didn't hear there.
People recommend it.
Yeah, people pay for it, they recommend it.
It's functional.
Did you say functional?
It works.
Yeah, functional, yeah. It works.
They'll buy it again.
Say again?
They'll buy it again.
Oh, they buy it again.
It solves the problem.
Yeah, it solves the problem.
They keep using it.
You guys have heard me talk. What else? Anything else? Yeah, well, I don't know if you're missing anything big. Well, think about a product that you like. Why do you like it? Yeah, it makes you money. Well, if it's something you bought, the money was made off you, but it makes its creator money. Unless you're in some kind of multi-level software thing. I don't know. What else did I hear?
Easy to learn.
Yeah, it's easy to learn.
Makes me happy.
Yeah, it makes me happy.
Gives you status.
Say that again.
Gives you status.
Status? Is that what you said? Yeah. Well, that's probably true. Things like technology products, like an Apple product, people buy those sometimes because of that. Okay, that may be enough. I do this because I want to point out that nobody said it's finished on time or or under budget or any of those other things, because those things have nothing to do with whether a product is successful or not. But if you've been involved in building software for any length of time, or at least I learned how to build software, I eventually stopped working in a software store and started actually building software. When the web was young, I was building software that worked on Mosaic browsers and Netscape browsers, the new Netscape browser back then. I was building websites, and I then went to work at a software company where we built software for brick and mortar retailers. First thing I did was run teams of developers who were building software, and I learned pretty quickly that software starts with somebody that has an idea for stuff we need to build, a new product or a new feature capability. And, well, that's the stuff that we started referring to as our requirements. Once we decided that was the stuff we were going to build, and we needed to turn those features or capabilities or products into a box, or something we could ship or carry out on a CD or something to deploy back then. And now, once we decided we were going to build this stuff, we wanted it now, so we worried about time or how long that was going to take. Of course, we worried about the cost or how much money we were going to spend. We learned pretty quickly that well, everybody knows this with software, is you don't pay for raw materials, you pay for how many people it's going to take over how much time to build it. And then we worry about all this stuff here, how many features, and all this stuff is scope. I'm assuming most people here are here because you're involved in some way or another in building technology. Is that true? Yeah? Okay, well, then does anybody have post-traumatic stress disorder over time, cost, and scope? I would expect so, just the way that it is. Everybody knows that it's called the iron triangle. This is the bad news triangle, because there's just no good news here. We want to know what we can get, how long it's going to take, and how much it's going to cost us. And the old saying is, you can only have two of the three. If you want to know time and scope, well, then the bad news is the cost is going to go up. If you want to say you want to fix the time and the cost, well, then the bad news is the scope is going to go down. And if you say, no, I need to fix all three, the bad news is there's four. The first one is, or the last one here is quality. That's the hidden fourth one. If you fix all three, quality squeezes out like toothpaste tube. And most of us spend our lives worrying about getting this stuff built in a reasonable amount of time, or getting as much as we can built, but none of this stuff has anything to do with this stuff. And I started at a small product company. Eventually, in 1989, I was working for a product company. There were 30 or so people there. We built software for retailers. I read about a lot of this stuff. And the very first time I shipped something, I realized, oh my gosh, this doesn't matter. All this stuff between here and here, it's just the project stuff. That's the project management stuff. I was lucky or unlucky enough to deal directly with my customers and users, and I learned pretty quickly that product development starts before this. I learned that you couldn't just give me a list of things to build. I learned that I needed to, well, talk directly to the people that were using my product, and when I did, I found that they were unhappy. They didn't have requirements. They were unhappy with this product that we have. Some people were unhappy. Some people were really unhappy. Some people were just struggling and frustrated. And I learned that I had to really understand who those people were. I needed to understand those users and customers and their problems. And I learned that what mattered is what happened after I shipped, or that's where it either hurt them or hurt me. What I hoped would happen is that those people that were happy, those people that were unhappy before were happy now. And for the people that have heard me talk before, what we hope is true is that they see this stuff and they try the stuff and they use the stuff, and we hope that they keep using the stuff. And ideally, we hope that they say good things about it. And if they don't do any of that stuff, then I've failed. And again, if they're happy, they're not happy because it was on time. They're happy because it was one of these things. Now, what I learned pretty quickly is when I was shipping a product, it wasn't to one person, it wasn't to a stakeholder, it was to a bunch of customers and a bunch of users, and people are different. Some people were less happy than other people, and some people there was no pleasing. All right, widen our scope this much, it looks like, okay, software, making good or making successful products is all about making people happy. But then there's this other makes its creator money thing that matters a lot. I work for a product company, and the other thing I learned pretty quickly, and you might have too, is that it really starts actually upstream. It starts in your organization. Your organization has a different responsibility. It needs to sustain itself. There are people inside your organization whose job is to pay attention to whether the organization is sustaining itself. They watch the revenue, they watch the cost, they want to make sure they're actually making profit. And if metrics are flat, those people are unhappy. But they're not unhappy because using the software sucks or it's hard to do their jobs. They're unhappy because the company isn't sustaining itself. Hopefully they get some guidance on what customers and users to focus on. And if we ship something and that something is awesome, if people see it and try to use it and like using it, if a few people do, that's great. But what we need is enough people to see and try and use and keep using this software so that those revenue metrics go up. When enough people do, people inside are happy. And again, and they are not happy because using the software was awesome. They're not happy because the software solved the problem. Their problem isn't doing their job with the software. Their problem is getting things like ROI. These people are happy because, well, if a lot of people use the software, that's going to help our market share. If a lot of people say good things about it, that helps our brand sentiment and reputation. These are the things that matter to your organization, and your customers can care less about your ROI or market share. That's not their problem, it's yours. So, because I'm going to worry about product success, it's all of this stuff from end to end that I've got to worry about. And if you thought on time was bad, if I'm trying to be on time with this stuff that makes you sad, I'll give you something bigger to cry about. You start worrying about that stuff. I draw this model over and over because I need people to understand the difference between the stuff in here, the output that we produce, and the stuff that matters the most, which is the stuff that happens when things come out. That's called outcome because of that. And outcome is not measured in how much you build. Or I can also promise that if you were to tell me about a product you love, well, you don't love it because it has the most features. We know that product companies that are wildly successful aren't successful because they have more features than other products. Otherwise, we'd all be carrying Zunes around in our pockets and trying to connect our Zunes to our Blackberries. That's not the way it works. There's other things that matter. Now, the annoying thing about all this product stuff is success is a function of what these people do, not what you do. It's completely out of your control. If these customers and users don't do all this stuff, you're in trouble. So we measure these outcomes based upon how they change their behavior, and even worse, how they feel. That sounds scary. Now, look, if enough of them change, we get all this business benefit. Some people use the word outcome for all this stuff out here. I like using the term impact to talk about the benefit for our organization. We don't get what we want unless they get what they want. All right, that's the quick product lesson, and now I need to give you the bad news about this stuff, and I think most people already knew this. The annoying problem with this stupid model is this idea thing. The problem there are three big problems with ideas. The first big problem with ideas is that, the big problem is that everybody has them. That's a problem. There are always too many. If you ask any of your customers or users what you should build or could build or how to make your product better, they will have ideas. People build stuff for internal use. Ask any of your employees, they will have ideas. And here's the other, just ask any stakeholders in your organization, they will have ideas. And here's the hard part, is that most of these ideas suck. Or it won't work out. If I were to tell you, I've got this cool idea for a new product, I'm going to join a startup, or I'm going to launch a startup, and you should quit your job and come work for my startup. Does that sound exciting or frightening? Why is that scary? What is the failure rate of technology startups? Yeah, a lot. I have some numbers. I have a couple of slides at least. Look, there's an organization called Startup Genome Report that does a lot of research. So if you want to find out what the startup failure rate is in the Asia-Pacific region relative to Europe or North America, that's a good place to go. And the numbers suck everywhere. It's 90+% of startups fail in a certain amount of time. It's easy to find references on this stuff. So look, if you had an idea to create launch a new startup, the odds of you creating something that would produce the product that people would see, try using, keep using, enough to sustain your business is 1 in 10 at best. Now, a weird thing happens. Once you get a product that's out there and it's sustaining itself, suddenly, as you start to improve it and add more features and capabilities, suddenly everybody believes their ideas are awesome from here on in. There aren't as many studies on this. There's a lot of anecdotal information and a lot of sad stories from companies I'll work with. One study that people cite is from the Standish Group. They do a survey report annually. They do a survey, they generate a report, they sell the report, and one of the questions on that is, well, they look at the number of features built that are rarely or never used. Depending on the year you look at the survey, it's anywhere between 65 and 75% of the features that are rarely or never used. One popular product and a company that I reference a lot is a company called Atlassian. If you build software for a living, does anybody here use Jira as a product? That's a lot of people, it's enough people. If you use Jira, you know what a product looks like. It has 65 to 75% of its features that are rarely or never used. Now, this would be a slam, but it's not a secret. They know it. Because they built the software a long time ago. They started building this stuff in the 2000s, and back then they shipped software, well, not in boxes, but on CDs and things like that. People would install it on premises. It was hard for them to get data back. They did this thing where they asked customers what they wanted, and the features that got asked for the most, they would put in the product. That seems sensible. But have you ever bought a product off a shelf, taken it home, used it, and said, this kind of sucks, and not used it anymore? Anybody bought something? We suck at predicting what we will try and use and keep using. And this was what happened with Atlassian. Lots of people asked for stuff in Jira, and, well, they were wrong. They didn't actually want to keep using it, and they didn't. Happily, they weren't out any money. They didn't have to pay more for the Jira licensing because Atlassian added that feature. The only people out money was Atlassian for putting those features in, and the only people that suffer is everybody else that has to use Jira from then on. There's an old saying that if you improve a product long enough, you will eventually ruin it. And that product, Jira, is officially ruined. If you're using Jira today, it's referred to as Jira Classic now, and they're working really hard to build something called Jira Next Gen, which is available now. It's super lightweight, but over the course of the next few years, Jira is being sunset. It's unrecoverable. We put lots of features in products that all seem like a good idea at the time. Now, when we talk about technology products, this guy's name is Marty Kagan. We kind of think of him as the patron saint of technology product development. He came out of HP. He worked for Ben Horowitz and Mark Andreessen at a company called Netscape when the internet was a new thing. But when browsers started to be part of operating systems and Netscape sold itself to AOL, he went to work for a startup called eBay. eBay had 100 or so people at that time. Marty led product at eBay, and he helped eBay grow up to the size it is today. He left there about 2008, and he led product at eBay. Now, he led lots of product managers, UX people, and product teams. And Marty said to me nonchalantly one day as we were driving someplace, he said, well, no, if you're really good at this stuff, you will be right about a third of the time. Now, immediately in my head, I inverted the number and said, are you telling me if I'm really good at this stuff, are you telling me I'm going to be wrong 2/3 of the time? And he said, well, yeah, but only if you're really good. Most people are not that good. And look, when a consultant like me tells you a number like that, you should be suspicious. But when the guy who ran eBay for over a decade and grew it up from a little company to a multinational company says that, maybe listen. This guy has done this for years, and he's put features in, measured how well they work, and pulled them back out for years. And the point he would go on the record with is that 50 to 80% of all the software we ship fails to accomplish its objectives. That's the way it is. So look, there's too many ideas. Most of these ideas suck. Let me hit the last thing here, and we've got a lot of ground to cover in the next half hour. Has anybody ever visited a startup accelerator before? You know what I mean by one of those kind of businesses? Is there startup accelerators here in Indy or surrounding cities? Several? Which one called? Say again? High Alpha. Has anybody ever visited High Alpha or one of those places? How many startups would you see in one of these accelerators here? 16 a year, so they might do, oftentimes they'll do these in cohorts, so you might see 4 or 5 in a cohort. Like this is fairly small. I've visited startup accelerators where you see over 100 startups working together under one roof in these big co-working spaces. What surprises me is these are usually fairly high energy spaces, with lots of people working together, lots of startups working together. What I really expected was to walk in there, and I expected to be super depressing places. For instance, if I told you that 80% of your employees were going to be laid off over the next year, your business would be super depressing. But when you walk into one of these startup accelerators, there's tons of startups there, and I can look around the room and I think, 80-90% of these people are going to be looking for jobs by this time next year. They don't seem bugged by it at all. If you talk to any one of them, they can tell you that, well, they're not stupid. They know that most startups fail. If you talk to any one of them, they will tell you, lots of startups fail, and they can look around the room at all the other companies there, and you can say, yeah, most of their ideas suck, but not ours. We are either blessed or cursed with this fatal optimism, or we end up calling this optimism bias. I think there's a type of bias for everything. It's a bias. Try and find a bias for everything. But we are biased, or we believe it's easy for us to imagine good outcomes when we have a good idea. That's just the way it is. So here's the problem. I'm drawing all this into the 1980s and 1990s. Software development is a fairly new thing. During the early 80s and 90s, 2, 3, 4 guys would work together and come up with a piece of software. But by the 1990s and later, now we've got hundreds of people working together to make a piece of software. And we make a piece of software, we ship it, people see it, try it, hate it, sell it to AOL, or I don't know, and it's awful, and we lose a lot of money, and we're spending a lot of money on projects and things that tank. And by the late 1990s and into the 2000s, people are starting to figure out ways to make this work. I want to point out in 2001, there were 2 warring tribes. This is where I became sort of woke. I got a very early start in Agile development in 2000. And in 2001, this thing called the Agile Manifesto was written. So we get Agile emerging in 2001. And Agile is based around a basic principle that it's going to suck. You're going to get this stuff wrong. So just ship it. It's going to suck anyway. You get Agile Manifesto values like, we're going to focus on just shipping working software. Stop trying to document it. Stop trying so hard to get it right. analysis paralysis stuff. Just decide on something and ship it. And since it's going to suck, we'll respond to change. And it'll be okay. And you get agile principles that come from the manifesto, like our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. We're going to focus on continuous delivery of valuable software. Working software is the primary measure of progress. It's all about how much stuff we can build, but little stuff. The goal is just that we will just build it and learn from what we build. So we focus on working software. And if we're going to focus on working software and change, we've got to worry about the design of that code. That design is so it's easy to change. We support it with tests. We invent things like test-driven development, and we automate regression tests. And we try and shorten the waterfall by making sure that everybody is collaborating and working together. So we worry about collaboration and cross-functional teams. And we optimize on getting things built quick so that we can start to see those outcomes, so we can start to see something work. Because there's so much focus on building working software, we work in short iterations. Processes like, anybody using a process called Scrum here? Scrum is sort of like sadistic agile. Scrum is, kind of sadistic waterfall thing. You take the time, and if you didn't think you had enough time, let's give you definitely not enough time. We'll shorten this to 2 weeks. Now, if you thought a quarter was bad, try 2 weeks. And we're going to fix the cost on you by fixing your team size. And because developers complain so much about fixed scope, we will make them fix the scope on themselves. We will start every sprint by telling them to commit, say how much they can deliver. And at the end of every sprint, we will make them demonstrate it so we can see how good the quality is or isn't. And we will measure their velocity and rub their nose in it. So whatever you hated about waterfall stuff, you can hate it every 2 weeks now. So we focus on working software, and we're so concerned about the quality, we come up with things like a definition of done, and we call it done when it's done and tested, or done when it's not tested, I don't know. And we use words like potentially shippable software, which means that it's so good that you can ship it if you wanted to, every 2 weeks. That's awesome. But then we've got this other community that says, that's not going to possibly work. Startups aren't failing because they don't ship software. Startups are failing because they ship stupid software, and you can't iterate your way out of this mess. I'm going to call this community the product design community. The product design community, well, they inherit a lot of thinking from what was kind of old school, or it's not old, people still work this way, in industrial design, or the design of physical products. People who did industrial design, one thought leader in industrial design is a company called IDEO, and they described a way of working, of starting with some sort of research, going out to the customers and users and talking directly with them and understanding their problems. In fact, you might understand that they've got a lot of problems that you could possibly solve. And we focus on specific problems. And we don't come up with a solution or an idea. We come up with lots of ideas, possible ideas. And we combine our best ideas and come up with some best ideas. And then we don't even assume those things are right. We prototype those ideas. And then we test those ideas, and we use that to change our ideas. We go back and forth with this. IDEO referred to this as something called design thinking. Anybody ever heard of design thinking as a thing before? This is a late 1990s thing, and they're pushing this sort of thing. And then you've got people that are doing traditional human-computer interaction work and usability engineering work, and a new thing called interaction design. All those people use something similar to this stuff. This is all the stuff we refer to as UX design these days. And they're saying, we need to do this kind of stuff. And all these people over here saying, you guys suck, this is what we always used to do, and they refer to this as big design up front. And throughout the 2000s, there's a bit of a warring tribe, kind of a warring group of people that are fighting about this stuff. Now, there's one person that everybody here should know. He should be super famous, but he's not. This guy's name is Frank Robinson. Frank Robinson built software in the 1980s and 1990s. He built a lot of stuff in boxes. In fact, the reason I chose that particular product that I showed you earlier today is because that was one of his products. He worked for Scholastic. He was a product manager for the product. The first time I met and talked to this guy, he was telling me where he worked, and I said, oh my God, I sell hundreds of that box that you produced. He said, and he told stories about how he did the research to build that product, and that was pretty interesting stuff. What Frank explained is that you have to do lots of this research and talking to customers and coming up with lots of prototypes, and you have to do all this stuff really fast. He said, look, there's a huge amount of pressure. There's always too much to build, and everybody wants everything, and it is super easy to jam your product filled with tons of features. But then it's going to take too much time. It's going to cost too much, and the goal is that you can't get to market. He said, look, what the hard part here is to find a small product that's successful. In fact, what we're looking for is the smallest product we can get, but a smallest product that can achieve its desired market outcomes. Sorry, I'm writing this down. Now, this idea of trying to come up with something super small but still wildly successful, he referred to this concept as an MVP, or a minimum viable product. Now, has anybody ever heard that term MVP before? Does anybody think it means this? So look, in 2001, Frank was a product design person, coins this term, and it's pretty straightforward. When he says the word product, what he means is product. When he says the word viable, what he means is you can release it to the market and it will succeed and your company will earn money on it. He means successful. Specifically, he means ROI, and when he says minimum, he means small. That's pretty straightforward. It means what it says. And that's the term I learned. So, look, in 2001, we got people talking about potentially shippable software, and you got another community talking about minimum viable products and talking about, well, ROI. And, of course, these people think each of them are idiots. And that's how things go for a while. Now, as a product person, the reason I'm familiar with this is because I was trying to do both and trying to convince people that, no, you need this and you need this. But the warring tribes didn't agree with that. And I need to fast forward to 2011 because things changed in 2011 and a bunch of little things happened all at once. I need you to know who this guy is. I have a serious love-hate relationship with this guy. This guy's name is Eric Ries. He wrote a book called The Lean Startup. Has anybody ever heard of Ries or the Lean Startup? Okay, you should. It made a big difference. But you can tell by that picture of him, he's a lot younger than Frank Robinson. The guy was in diapers in the 1990s, wasn't born in the 1980s, and didn't start building software into the 2000s, and he has no idea what software in a box looks like. Or, well, I'm guilty of hyperbole here. Look, in the mid-2000s, he was building software, and he was building web software. He was the CTO of this failing startup called IMVU. Has anybody ever heard of IMVU? Maybe because you read The Lean Startup as a book or something like that. The company is still in business, but it is one of those startups that will never return money to its investors. It was not wildly successful. Now, Eric was a big proponent of agile development. He was using agile development, and he learned pretty early on that we could build software really predictably, really fast. But he learned the other hard lesson is that the faster you build crap, the more crap you get. Just because he could build stuff fast didn't mean that people tried it or used it or kept using it or said good things about it. And it definitely didn't mean they were going to pay, which definitely hurt all this stuff. And that was a problem. Now, like a lot of people back then, he was using the term MVP, and he was saying, hey, look, I built an MVP. Well, it wasn't successful, and so that means it wasn't viable. And this guy on his board of directors named Steve Blank said, that's not the way it works, Eric. You seem to think that building an MVP is guessing at what people want and then shipping that. That's not the way the MVP thing works. You're not meant to guess. You're meant to actually do the work. And Steve Blank wrote a book on this called 4 Steps to Epiphany, and he described a lot of stuff. Has anybody ever heard of that book, 4 Steps to Epiphany? Anybody ever read the book? It's not an easy read. The book sucks. Don't read the book. Read one of his later books. Steve Blank, not a great communicator, at least in early books. He's a great communicator in person, I think. But he described this stuff, and particularly he described this concept of validated learning to Eric. So you need to know how that works, because that's one of the, discovering this was a big thing, or at least Eric discovering this was a big thing. Validated learning works like this. It starts with an idea, just like the other model I did, and then you build a backlog. Now, this starts to sound like agile development, except that this backlog is not filled with features or capabilities or enhancements. This backlog is filled with scary stuff. It's filled with risks and assumptions and lots of unanswered questions. We're making the assumption that we can build this software economically or on time, but the bigger assumptions we're making are that people actually have a problem we understand and that they actually want our product, and enough of them do that we can make money on it. There's lots of assumptions all over this model. If you start writing all those down, you're going to come up with a long list. And like all backlogs, the thing at the top is the one that matters the most. I'm going to call that our riskiest assumption. And for Eric, his riskiest assumption is that anybody actually wanted his product. And you turn that riskiest assumption to a question like, does anybody want this product? And then you ask, what's the least I can do? What's the least I can do to answer that question? You want to call that a test plan, and then you get to work and you build a test. Now, if you want to find out if people want your product, just try and sell it. And see if they buy it. Elon Musk is awesome at this. Did anybody put your money down to buy a Tesla Model 3? Did anybody do that? Was I the only one? Elon Musk sold lots of Tesla Model 3s before any car started rolling off the production line. And he's pretty good at that. He proved there was demand for it long before anybody could see or touch one. There's lots of ways to, if you want to test if people can easily use your product, build a prototype and usability test it. There's lots of things you can do here, but it isn't building potentially shippable software. Now, once you build something, get it out in front of people. If you wanted to test usability of your product, if your biggest risk is that people can learn how to use it, build a prototype and watch them use it. And out of doing that test, you will get back some data. And, well, there's lots of information. The one thing you are not going to get back is return on investment or dollars, or unless if you're testing to see if people want it, you may get back a few dollars that prove that people want it, but not money to fund a business. But with that data, you will change your idea and change your risks, and then the whole thing starts over again. Now, this is the kind of stuff that Steve Blank explained, and if you took as long as I did, you can tell that's why it didn't catch on. It's kind of complicated to explain. So Eric distilled this into a simple, happy mantra, referred to as build, measure, and learn. Now, I suspect people here have heard that build, measure, learn mantra before, But the annoying thing about Eric is he sucks at naming things. Eric came from an agile background, and he used the word build, but when people that are agile hear the word build, they think you mean potentially shippable software, not a test, not a prototype, not any of the things that we're talking about here. And when people hear the word measure, especially people that have been shipping software and measure it using data, they think you mean release something and get data from it, not watch somebody use a prototype and write down what happened. So build may not mean build, measure may not mean measure the way you're thinking, but at least learn means learn. So this is a little off. Now the other thing Eric noticed is, hey, you thought those 2-week cycles that we're using in Scrum are short. The truth is you can get around this cycle super fast. In fact, you can get around this cycle in hours or a day or days. Last month, one of the clients I was working with was Alaska Airlines. Their head office is really close to SeaTac Airport. One of the things they're working on are faster ways to get into the lounge. They're testing fingerprint ID stuff. They built some fairly simple prototypes, and they also need to understand users, and they jump in the car and drive over to SeaTac and talk to people. If they've got something they want to learn, they can decide what they want to learn in the morning and get out there by lunchtime and get back to the office by the end of the day and talk about what they learned and how it has changed things. It's not a 2-week sprint to do this. In fact, saying we're going to do this in 2 weeks, it doesn't quite work out because you can't plan 2 weeks of this stuff because after you get one time around the loop, it's only then that you know what your next thing to do is. You cannot plan on Monday what you'll be doing on Wednesday because it depends on what happened on Tuesday. So we can no longer plan 2 weeks worth of work if we're doing these short validated learning loops. These things might take hours or days, or for some long service, they could take a week or weeks, but the goal was to do these as quick as possible or reduce our cycle time. Now, one of the things that Eric said, look, I can't just use an off-the-shelf agile process anymore, I've got to change this a little bit. And one of the processes that focuses on reducing cycle time is a lean process. They hit that concept hard. Anybody familiar with that lean thing before? Where does lean come from?
Toyota.
Yeah, it comes from Toyota. If anybody's read lean principles before, you know there's a lot more to lean than reducing cycle time. There are 14 principles and lots of stuff in there, and it's been around a lot longer than any of this stuff. But Eric borrowed one part of lean, not very much lean, and Eric happened to work for a failing startup. So the book I call Lean Startup. It is not very lean, and validated learning is not a startup thing. It's just a thing. Any company that has risks, assumptions, and questions needs to do this, no matter how long you've been in business. You don't need to be a startup. So, build, measure, learn, not build, not measure, maybe learn. Lean startup, not lean, not for startups. And now, to add insult to injury, Eric attacks this MVP thing and says, hey, that's just a guess. And what we need is a better definition for this. So in 2011, Eric Ries said, what we need to focus on is the smallest thing we can do or make to test a product hypothesis. Now, hypothesis is this sanitized word for guess. You say hypothesis, that sounds sciencey, like we meant to do it, and that's good. And what he's talking about is, well, that thing, that test, that's our MVP. It's that prototype. It's at least we can do to learn the next thing. The thing that took hours or days, not a whole sprint to produce. It isn't potentially shippable. In fact, it's intentionally. Well, if we ship it, we're only shipping to a few people to learn something. We're not going to ship it. You don't ship tests to everybody. So he renamed this in 2011. He cited Robinson as the source, changed the meaning of the thing, and then proceeded to sell millions of books. The person who sells the most books wins. And Frank didn't. So now Eric's definition sort of reigns. But the problem is when Eric says product, what he means is test. And when Eric says viable, what he means is you learned something. And so when you say minimum viable product to someone who hasn't read Eric's book, they might actually think you mean viable product because that's what you said. But they probably don't think you mean test it like you learned something. Well, when you said minimum, at least that does mean small. At least that part still is good. He gets 1 out of 3 usually on these. Now, if you don't understand any of this stuff, and if you are still stuck in a little bit of the old waterfall mindset, where you worry about time, cost, and scope, you get the third weird anti-definition, which is the most we could ship in time. Also known as first crappy release. So I'm going to tell you this word is poison. Don't use it anymore. You need to focus on small, successful releases. And the way you do that is by iteratively testing. And you keep looking for your next best test. And don't ship first crappy releases. You're not going to be successful that way, not as a product company. Now, this stuff, Eric wrote this book in 2011. People in the design community grabbed onto that. They said, yeah, that's design. That's what we've been talking about. But your focus on building smaller things actually might be an improvement over the way we talked about it. And we're going to rebrand what we do as something like Lean UX, if anybody's heard of that. And those people that do design thinking, we're going to rebrand ourselves, and we're going to call this a design sprint. Makes it agilely and designy, and that's it's a hybrid. And we're going to do that alongside of agile stuff. So we're going to do this kind of stuff and this kind of stuff. And then engineering gets into this stuff and said, you know what? We can build code really fast, and we can do things like A/B testing and things like that. And the DevOps community, who are big into this product stuff these days, jumps on board and they say, hey, we can build a lot of stuff fast and ship it to a small number of people and toggle it on and off using feature flags or things like that and actually test to see if it works. If it doesn't work, we're DevOps. We can roll it back super fast. That's how awesome this is going to be. You get people like, well, has anybody ever here seen a talk on DevOps before? Just out of curiosity? Okay, just a few. Anybody tired of raising their hand every time I do this? More than see DevOps talks. In every DevOps talk I've ever seen, I see this stupid because I'm tired of seeing it. This quote that at Amazon, we ship every 11.6 seconds. First, he said this in 2011. I hope they've improved a little bit in the last 8 years. It's got to be a lot faster than that. But in Amazon, they ship every 11.6 seconds. First, you have to divide that over however many teams they've got, and they've got a lot of them. But what they're shipping every 11.6 seconds isn't new versions of Amazon.com. They are little tiny tests, little things that help us see if we're building the right thing. In fact, I'm going to play a short snippet. This is from a friend of mine, Henrik Nieberg. He produced a couple of videos that describes how Spotify does things because he was at Spotify for a long time. And in his videos, he talked about how Spotify how they do this build, measure, learn stuff. Now, they redefine it a little bit, and he does use that term MVP, but he is super particular about what he means by that. He means something they ship, but not to everyone. I want you to listen to who they ship it to, and then what they do after that.
Our product development approach is based on lean startup principles, and is summarized by the mantra, think it, build it, ship it, tweak it. The biggest risk is always building the wrong thing. So before deciding to build a new product or major feature, we try to inform ourselves with research. Do people actually want this? Does it solve a real problem for them? Then we define a narrative, kind of like a press release or an elevator pitch, showing off the benefits. For example, radio you can save, or follow your favorite artist. We also define hypotheses. How will this feature impact user behavior and our core metrics? Will they share more music? Will they log in more often? And we build various prototypes and have people try them out to get a sense of what the feature might feel like and how people react. Once we feel confident this thing is worth building, we go ahead and build an MVP, minimum viable product. Just enough to fulfill the narrative, but far from feature complete. You might call it the minimum lovable product. The next stage of learning happens once we put something into production, so we want to get there as quickly as possible. We release the MVP to just a few % of all users, and use techniques like A/B testing to measure the impact and test our hypotheses. The squad monitors the data and continues tweaking and redeploying until they see the desired impact. Then they gradually roll out to the rest of the world, while taking the time needed to sort out practical stuff like operational issues and scaling. By the time the product or feature is fully rolled out, we already know it's a success, because if it isn't, we don't roll it out. Impact is always more important than velocity, so a feature isn't really considered done until it has achieved the desired impact. Note that, like most things in this video, this is how we try to work, but our actual track record, of course, varies.
Let me reinforce a couple points there. By the way, that really is a sign on Spotify's wall. I was there, I took the picture, and I didn't do that. The idea is that we ship less than perfect software, but only to a few percentage of our users. If you're doing B2B software, you find a subset of partner customers you'll ship to. Early adopters will take less than perfect software. You iterate it until it's awesome. You're not afraid to kill stuff that doesn't work. And you notice he nonchalantly said, well, once we get it right, then we do the other stuff, like scaling it, which is a big deal when you've got millions of users and you're shipping to lots of countries. Scaling it comes after. The mantra from the product world is nail it before you scale it. This is the way this works. You're using DevOps to ship just enough to fulfill the narrative, but far from feature complete, and you're shipping it to a very tiny subset of users. Because it would be stupid to ship product that sucks to everybody. And that's not going to work out. In 2011, we start using all this agile thinking and all this design thinking together for the first time. And companies are doing this really deliberately. One of the things happened in 2011, and I know I'm running over time for the people who are watching my time, but I promise I'll close out pretty soon. I'm going to talk about this guy, and let's fast forward to today. This guy's name is Mark Andreessen. He was Marty Kagan's boss back in Netscape days. He runs a venture capital firm called Andreessen Horowitz now, and they're behind a lot of big companies. I should know off the top of my head, but they include people like Uber and Twitter and things like that. At least they were VCs behind those. In 2011, he wrote this article about why software is eating the world. And he said, look, software will eat the world. Software is in everything. And he made the assertion in 2011 that everything that can be software will be software. And he was slightly wrong. Because, well, he's true about the software thing, but he kind of understated the value of the internet and how everything is wired and everything is connected. And how we don't just carry around one computer anymore, we carry around tons of computers. Computers in our watches and our phones, and all those things are connected. That when we think of what a product looks like today, look, Apple's big innovation was that this is now a computer, and this is a computer. And if you think back to the 2000s, when you hated your phone, you bought a new phone. And now, your phone will change every single week, and there's an app for that. And when's the last time you used your phone to make a phone call? Because they're just not that anymore. Watches are not watches anymore. They tell me my heart rate and where I am in the world and measure my health. Light bulbs are not even light bulbs anymore. My vacuum will email me when it is done, and it will cry for help when it is stuck under the couch. I can set my thermostat from here, and I live in Utah. And my wife knew that she'd watch the dogs when she wasn't home. We have this. A long time ago, people used to work for years to build a super cool game and release it, and it would either be wildly successful or it would tank. But now we release a game, and if it sort of sucks, we keep iterating it and improving it. And the biggest game in the world these days is Fortnite, which sucked when it first released, and then they pivoted and tried a battle royale version and keep getting better and better, and it scares the crap out of people like Electronic Arts, which tries to compete by releasing something else that's like that. And games are not games anymore. There are these things that release continuously and change constantly. They're completely unboxed. Now, you used to think TV or a movie was something you would go and see or tune into on must-watch Thursdays, but everybody knows that TV is something you binge whenever you want. The biggest people investing in new entertainment are these kinds of companies. And financial organizations are only financial organizations. I had to speak of banks. I don't know who half these companies are, but they're companies that scare banks. These are fintechs that are disrupting banking. And we all know that software we use today is completely unboxed. The software we use, we subscribe to, we pay monthly for. It's more like a service, and no one's waiting for the next cool new release of Netflix or Uber or Spotify because they're changing constantly. So, actually, let me give you the two last examples. Look, I drive a cool German car, and I've had this German car before, and the entertainment systems always suck. Except, let me just point out Tesla first, because Tesla scares the crap out of German car manufacturers. They're working hard to be a lot like Tesla, and my German car that had this crap entertainment system, now it is awesome because it's no longer made by the German car manufacturer. It's now made by Apple, and it integrates in with CarPlay, and Android has a competitive standard until my German car manufacturer figures out a way to release it and make it faster with every release. I'm not going to be completely happy. And maybe last example here is, let me ask you the trick question, the what would you pay for a jet engine question. And if you're Rolls Royce, the answer is, well, you don't pay for the jet engine, you just pay for the power. A jet engine is a service. It's an Internet of Things wired device, and this SCP company has a little bit to do with that. And we watch these devices. Rolls-Royce maintains these things, and they sell it almost the same way Fortnite is sold, or at least you pay for the use of the thing. So here's where I want to end up. It is 2019, and products have fundamentally changed. They are not boxed anymore. They don't have to release every 6 months or every year or every couple of years. Products evolve faster than our process. It's the products and the ability to evolve fast that makes us have to learn faster and build faster. And look, it's 2019, and yeah, all this stuff makes a product awesome. But what makes a product successful in 2019? Let's say 2020, because it's nice and round. What does it need to do? Adaptable. No, it changes. It evolves. How do products like this evolve fast? I don't want to get too Socratic here.
It integrates.
The integrates thing is super important. What makes Slack so wildly successful is all the other crap that Slack doesn't do that it integrates with. What makes my entertainment system and my Porsche cool is because I did purposely say I have a Porsche. Is that it uses CarPlay, things like that. Look, we expect these things to be adaptable. We expect them to change. We expect them to learn. For them to learn, they're going to have to gather bucket loads of data about us. We certainly expect them to be wired or on the internet, or wired or connected. Wired? How old am I? It's not wires anymore. These are the characteristics of contemporary products. And the thing I find when I'm working with a lot of companies is this sort of boxed mindset. This idea that we want to get as much into that box by a fixed amount of time as we can. It doesn't work that way anymore. And the processes we use are a side effect of that. There's probably a good key point that I need to end up with here, because we're pretty much done. One company that really is pretty good at innovating and paying attention to stuff and would not self-identify as agile, wouldn't self-identify as doing lean startup, is a company that's steadfastly focused on just, well, look, just says that the process serves you so that you can serve the customer. Now, what he really means by that is, if you're going to be the richest guy in the world, if you're going to make money faster than anyone else, you better do this. This is the way products work today. All right, with that, I am over time, and I want to stop talking. All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, so if you've never heard that before, always engaging, always entertaining, and he always has more content than time allows. So, yeah, he was only 6 minutes over today, so that's good for you. But if you're like me, I don't ever care because Jeff always has so much good stuff I can listen to more. So I know it's after time. If you have to leave, feel free to get up and do so. If you can stay for a little longer, we will do question and answers and give you a chance to ask Jeff some questions. So if you gotta leave, get up and go. Don't worry about it. But if you can stay, who has the first question?
What are some of the things that you're working on now? Hi, Jeff. Thanks for the nice talk. What are some of the fun things that you get working on with all of this awesome product knowledge of yours?
So you said, what are some of the fun things, or nothing? What's interesting is the companies that are really awesome at doing this thing. One claim to fame I have is I taught the very first product management class inside of Spotify. When Spotify was less than a couple hundred people, and they were a small Stockholm company, and they were trying